But if we keep relying on this egoic mechanism to wake up and realize the self, then it's going to be a very long, painful journey that never ends. And I'm trying to get back to the self, or perhaps what motivates a lot of us trying to get away from this egoic sense of self towards something else, then can it ever really resolve? And maybe this is the surrender if we look at it deeply. Maybe the act of surrendering, how do we actually do that? How do we give up this seeking? How do we put the brakes on this egoic mechanism that's never content with where we are? Because it's working on what it thinks is happening in this moment. Ego works on the assumption I'm a separate being, and so is everybody else. Now, all these objects that I see internally of thought and emotion and experience, and externally as physical manifestations, the world, are actually what they seem to be, that they're actually real standalone things. And my thoughts are actual things that have actually arisen out of the self, just like all of this seems to have. How do we give up that idea then, that trying to get somewhere other than where we are, to an imagined future place, or even an imagined place right now that we are sure is going to be better than where we are now? And for me, suddenly this became extraordinarily important at one point. Like, how do there's this freight train of momentum going towards this seeking, desperately trying to find some other place to be than where I am right now. How do I put the brakes on that? How do I begin to slow that down and maybe even eventually redirect that seeking to a finding, to a seeing, rather than a searching and a reaching? How do I stop comparing, judging, evaluating myself, my awakening, comparing myself with where I think I should be, where I was a year ago, where other beings around me are in their awakening, comparing myself to them, comparing myself to the great teachers that have walked this earth, the great enlightened beings. All of that comparison, how do we come out of that? And there is a way that is perhaps simpler than we realize, and that is to redirect that energy. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that energy of seeking in itself. Maybe it's useful if we can find a better place to put it. Can we turn and redirect this momentum, bring it around to look at, to become interested in what is already here? We can't achieve this ever until we're willing to admit to ourselves inside that where we think we are and where we seem to be in our awakening, where we want to get to, might just be fictional places. They might not actually exist in reality. Of course, they seem very, very real. It will seem extraordinarily real, as I remember myself. This sense that I'm not there yet, that I'm obviously not there yet, because I'm suffering, I'm having negative emotions, I'm having horrible experiences, I'm having all of that going on. We can allow that to fuel more reaching or more traveling, or we can allow that to fuel our sense that we might not have seen it all already, that the assumptions that we're working off might not be true, that where we think we are in our awakening might not be so at all. And maybe this is the deepest surrender, that our most treasured ideas about ourselves and our awakening, we're willing to question even those. We're willing to question assumptions that have driven and motivated this frantic searching and trying to find. And when we get to that point of willingness, which is not something that happens by chance, we can cultivate that intentionally. What if I've been wrong? What if I am there, even though my life may be shouting at me that I'm not? What if I am already that? And my trying to reach it is making it seem I'm not where I want to be. And maybe my experiences keep reflecting my belief that I'm not where I want to be spiritually yet. And that willingness to question even these deeply treasured ideas comes up. And that to me is surrender. That's as deep as I ever managed to surrender, is to admit I might have been really, really wrong about a lot of my motivation for trying to improve myself, trying to even realize the self that has been based upon some sense that I'm not enough already. I'm not already where I'm trying to get to come to an understanding that no matter what my life looks like in this moment, it may not be based on reality. And if I'm willing to surrender these final ideas, to let go of holding them so tightly, I can turn this seeking freight train energy around into a finding what is already here. Maybe I haven't seen what's already here. Maybe I haven't fully seen what I already am. Maybe I'm skimming the surface of my being, my life, my moment, my experience. And maybe there's more that I can experience that's already here. And that seeking can turn from being this outward thing, trying to get somewhere other than I am, to diving inwards into myself, into this moment, into reality, all the same thing. That there's nothing wrong inherently with that drive, but where that drive is taking us is perhaps the most important thing. And that we can consciously foster this willingness to say, I might not have seen everything there is to see and experience about myself and this moment. I remember realizing at one point that if I was suffering at all, it was because I was believing my ideas about myself, about the self, or about someone else. And that those ideas were only available on the surface, the tip of the iceberg. And that if I inquired deeper, that seekingness began to turn inwards. And not as in a, I need to be better than I am, because I'd done enough of that. And I knew it didn't get me anywhere except disturbed. But turning that seeking inwards to a willingness to find, a willingness to see. So this cessation of trying to get to some other place, and this willingness to look and see where I already am, in a humbling kind of recognition that I probably haven't seen everything there is to see. That any seeing or epiphany I have feels complete and total and finished when I have it. But any insight or a moment of clarity feels like the end of seeing, that it feels complete. And yet, if we really are infinite in our nature, then there can be an infinite number of seeings that we can have. And that you can never get to the end of that seeing of what you really, really are. You are it already, but we can always see it clearer. And in that, paradoxically, there is a deep, deep rest. There's nothing I can do to get away from being the self. I've never actually managed to pull that off, to be a separate being. No matter how vivid my imagination was as the infinite being, I never was separate. And that really means there is nobody other than me. And there is nothing else that can hurt me. And that all of that has been a very convincing illusion while I gave my agreement to it as the infinite self, infinite power. Anything that I look at, I will experience as real. And if I believe I am a separate being and that I'm living in a world full of other beings, that will seem extraordinarily real for a very long time. So much so that I won't even think to question it until it becomes so small and constricted. And that agreeing with the illusion is perhaps still going on for us, but in a different way, in this idea that we have seen all there is to see in this moment, that there is nothing else about this moment that we're all experiencing right now, that that what we're experiencing about it, of it, is the fullness of it. No matter how good we feel or how open we are, we can always see clearer for the joy of it, for the fun of it, for the recognition of it. So I came to this understanding and kind of felt my way through it of what surrender is. Can I give back this traveling? Can I give back this searching and begin to use that energy to find, to see, to open, to become more curious? Curiosity is the opposite of seeking. Seeking is based on the idea that I'm not where I want to be. Curiosity is a willingness to see clearly where I already am, and a willingness to be surprised by what we find, that we might just find the Buddha right where we're sitting, that we might find that there really isn't anything left for us to do, that there really isn't any journey that can happen that can make us more ourselves than we already are. That we can make all kinds of experiences appear, good, bad, and ugly, as the self, when we believe in certain ideas, thoughts, that power takes the shape of that idea and we experience it as very, very real. But that none of those have been ultimately real. That we are already right where we have always been, and that nothing has ever really occurred to us as the self. That the infinite being is dreaming itself to be split into infinite parts, and then dreaming itself trying to come back to wholeness. But that is also the last part of the journey, and it fuels this seeking, seeking, seeking. So how do we surrender? How do we do that? How do we turn inwards? And it's really, for me, this willingness. If there's one word that really resonated for me, it was a willingness to look again, to look continuously, not in a hard work way, but to never reach a final conclusion, that I know what I am, and I know what all this is, and I know what the self is. Because the moment we reach a conclusion, we have lost our curiosity, and we're going to experience in a very contracted way again.